I really love diving deep into relationships with all of you, so let's talk about Love is Blind, episode 10. Hi, I'm Dr. Pam, therapist and passionate relationship counselor, and in today's video, I'm going to be diving into Dave's confusing and contradictory behavior. Is he lying? Is he manipulating? Or is something deeper going on? I'm going to say this right up front. It is complicated. And we so often want to put people in neat little boxes because it makes them easier to understand. But the truth is, none of us fit perfectly into a box. Throughout this entire video, I'm going to be showing you clips from the entire season. Moments where Dave, in his own words, gives us clues into what we need to really understand what's driving his behavior. And when we put those pieces together, a deeper story starts to emerge, one that isn't obvious when we first meet Dave. One more thing, we all know that Love is Blind is a heavily edited show, and it's really important for you to know that my comments are based solely on what we see, and this is not about judgment. It's about learning from the experience of the people on this show, for which I am truly grateful. Okay, let's start here.
Dave, I'm frustrated that he's saying that he wants to continue figuring things out, but then he leaves. Last night, he texted me at 3 in the morning saying that he was going to stay at his apartment and that we can hopefully figure things out tomorrow.
One of the things that I'll be sharing with you today is the many contradictions we see in Dave. For example, Lauren tells us that Dave says he wants to work things out, but then he leaves. In a previous video, I suggested that Dave may have experienced some form of early childhood trauma, and it may be trauma that he's not even fully aware of. Sometimes trauma, especially, for example, emotional neglect, it doesn't always feel like what we typically think of as trauma, but it is still deeply impactful. People who have experienced emotional neglect will often say that they had a perfectly normal childhood because there is nothing glaringly obvious to point to.
I had such a typical white dude growing up.
Sure.
I had a great childhood.
If you had a great childhood, you would not do this.
One of our first conversations was about how you push people away.
Yep.
So Dave admits to Molly that he pushes people away. We see signs of that here. Dave seems torn. He craves connection with Lauren, yet he avoids it and even sabotages it. And this is a common pattern with emotional neglect. When someone grows up without the consistent emotional attunement, they often don't learn how to be in a relationship with healthy intimacy, vulnerability, or trust. It's like growing up in a house where no one ever really speaks the language of love and then being expected to speak it fluently as an adult. Even if the desire is there, the tools are missing. And without realizing it, you end up pushing the very thing away that you long for. And that conflict is what we're watching play out here with Dave, among many other things that are playing out, which I'll talk about throughout this video.
We get our phones back. I get millions of messages, and they're telling me, why are you engaged to this girl that basically had a boyfriend going into the experiment?
Dave is bringing up the issue of Lauren being with another guy, almost as if it's the first time it's being discussed. And I believe that I know why, and I'll say more about that in a minute, but let's just watch a little more.
All of my close friends and family, aka my sister, heard about this guy. Mm-hmm. You probably didn't expect me to have such a connection with this guy. I go back to that and I'm just did she just think she was gonna come back and not face this?
Have you noticed that Dave has more of an edge when he brings this up with Lauren again? And there's a reason for that, which I will also get to in a moment. But here's something interesting to consider in the meantime. Why is Dave holding so tightly to questioning and doubting Lauren's integrity when he was the one in the pods who openly admitted to lacking integrity that he now seems to condemn?
She was just very hard on me about just doing the right thing, having integrity. And I haven't always had that.
Dave is challenging Lauren on trust and integrity, and as I explained in a previous video, he may never fully trust her because he doesn't appear to trust himself. He consistently relies on the perspective of others and shifts what he thinks and feels based on who's in front of him and what they believe. But there's another layer here. When someone hasn't acted with integrity in their own past, especially how they've treated others in relationships, it becomes difficult for them to believe that someone else is showing up with integrity. They assume that others operate the same way they have. And do you remember when Lauren said this to Dave?
I hear it not only from my friends, but like my sister has mutual connections. She's just like, who is this girl that you're engaged to that was like with some other guy?
I've never in my life had to like defend my character. Never been in a situation.
And you shouldn't.
When someone has struggled with integrity for most of their life, it becomes very hard for them to trust that anyone else truly has integrity. They project their own internal challenges onto others, and that seems to be happening here with Dave. So take, for instance, when he tells Lauren that she shouldn't have to defend her character, yet his behavior constantly puts her in a position where she does have to defend her behavior. It's confusing and it feels like gaslighting, but is it intentional? Is he lying? Or is there something deeper going on? Let's start here. Dave's friends and sister are feeding him their conclusions about Lauren, and instead of evaluating those opinions for himself, he takes them in as truth in the moment. Why? Because when you don't have a strong internal sense of who you are or what you believe, you become easily swayed by people around you. It's as if he's borrowing their perspective because he doesn't have his own clear compass. This creates a confusing and even painful dynamic for Lauren. He says one thing and does another. He tells her she doesn't need to prove herself yet, repeatedly demands she do just that. But I don't believe that Dave is connecting those dots. This kind of inner confusion often starts in childhood. When a child doesn't have someone who really sees them, listens closely, and helps them make sense of what they're feeling and thinking. Without that emotional teaching, a child grows up not knowing how to access or trust their own inner world. That's what I believe we're seeing here in Dave. While I do think there are moments when he lies, likely as a defense against shame, it also seems clear that he doesn't hold the whole picture at once. He is fragmented. And when you're fragmented, you say one thing and you do another, and you don't even realize the disconnect. Okay, let's get back to the discussion between Dave and Lauren.
I'm getting frustrated because like on Sunday you literally said, I don't give a shit about like who you hooked up with before this, and now we're coming back to it.
Because we're coming back to it because of the way your dad approached me, saying that he thought I was there just to like kind of see what happens.
First, there's the inner disconnection I'm talking about. One day, Dave tells Lauren that her past doesn't matter to him, and then he suddenly changes his stance based on the conversation he has with someone. In this case, it was Lauren's father. And it is this conversation with Lauren's father that has impacted Dave. And this is why he is bringing this up with an edge, with judgment and an accusatory tone. It's not just about Lauren. It's about the anger he is still carrying from whatever Lauren's father said to him. Watch closely.
Does he know the whole story?
He does.
It didn't really seem like they fully understood. He was like, I thought Lauren was very ready for an engagement when she left. Sounds like you weren't. And I was like, okay, she was the one that kind of had a relationship going into it. I did not.
Lauren's dad challenged Dave. Now, I don't know if Lauren ever challenged Dave off camera, but on camera, we see that she didn't. What we saw instead was she repeatedly defended herself, trying so hard to get Dave to believe her. I think that when Lauren's dad challenged Dave, it touched something deeper in him. He seemed angry afterward, and I imagine he may have felt some shame in that moment. That doesn't mean that Lauren's father meant to shame him. He may have simply been expressing concern for his daughter. But for someone like Dave, even gentle confrontation can feel threatening if they haven't developed the internal safety to hold their own sense of worth in those moments. And now we see Dave taking a bit of a self-righteous stance, perhaps not intentionally, but it's a way to cope. When someone feels shame, it's common to focus outward, sometimes becoming overly critical of others. It can be a form of protection, trying to feel more secure by sort of holding the moral high ground. It's an unhealthy coping mechanism to combat their shame. Because remember when Dave admitted these things about himself in the pods?
I just have kind of been an ass to women. I mean, it was always about looks right away for me.
I'm 30.
Okay. So you're no longer attractive. Having integrity. I haven't always had that.
You know, the takeaway here is this. Believe what people tell you about themselves. There's no doubt that Dave carries shame about these parts of himself. So when he's questioned, that shame likely surfaces. But the challenge is he likely doesn't even realize that he's feeling shame. A lot of people don't. They're not aware of it in the moment. Instead, they react to it. Sometimes that means getting angry and lashing out. Other times it looks like pulling away, or sometimes both. But there's more to reveal. Keep watching.
This is something that you need to work through and be a team member with them.
Yes,
because
I
if
am.
you were, then
yes,
this
I
would
am.
have been minuscule shit.
You have no reason to say that to me. Putting it on me that I'm not ready for a teammate. Sound like your dad right now.
When Dave says, "You sound like your dad right now," there it is, his anger coming through. It's a defensive moment, and instead of reflecting on his own role in the conflict, he takes no responsibility. He puts it all on Lauren. This is what happens when you challenge someone who hasn't developed the capacity to hold both their own perspective and someone else's at the same time. Rather than engaging in self-reflection, that person will deflect. They shift to blame. Because looking inward, especially when there's unresolved shame or insecurity, can feel too threatening. So instead of acknowledging his part, Dave redirects the tension back onto Lauren, reinforcing a dynamic where she feels like she's constantly on trial. Also, I am going to reveal a big insight to you soon about Dave not introducing Lauren to her family, but let's keep going with this conversation.
He easily could have come on the experiment and said what he had to say, but he didn't. And he also said shit about my dad and sister not wanting to be involved. Yeah, you wonder why? You didn't either. So what the was that?
So
That was up.
I don't understand why this is all on me.
If Lauren had challenged Dave from the beginning, instead of trying to defend herself or convince him to trust her, she likely would have experienced what we're seeing now. Dave placing all the blame on her. This points to a deeper pattern in their dynamic. Dave doesn't seem to be able to tolerate being questioned without feeling attacked, even though he's not being attacked. So when Lauren defends herself, he maintains control of the narrative. But if she were to challenge him directly, it would likely trigger his shame. And rather than sit with that discomfort, he'd protect himself by flipping the script and making her the problem. That's what makes this dynamic so difficult. Lauren tries to earn trust by proving herself, and Dave avoids trust by projecting his own inner challenges onto Lauren. It's not just about their communication, it's about an emotional pattern rooted in protection, fear, and the inability to hold the complexity of a relationship. This is why I always say, no one is truly ready for a serious, committed relationship until they have experienced conflict with their partner. Because how someone approaches conflict reveals so much about who they are. It shows you their emotional maturity, their capacity for self-reflection, and whether they seek connection or control when things get hard.
Well, I'm hesitant to bring you fully into my life and introduce my good friends and family to you. My sister, she's worried about me.
Since the day we got back, I was like, I want to talk to your friends and family. Yeah. My friends and family have been part of this. You've been keeping your friends and family at bay.
Lauren is pointing out a real contradiction in Dave. She introduced him to her family and friends. She welcomed him into her world. but he hasn't done the same. And his explanation, that his family is worried about him and being protective. But I don't believe that's the full picture. And that's where the deeper insight comes in, which I'm going to reveal in just a moment.
My friends and family are the most supportive people I know. They would have been here if I really wanted them to be here. They would have showed up.
Okay, so Dave says that his friends and family would meet Lauren if he really wanted them to meet her. Is he lying? Because he also says this.
If he loved me and if he like said all of the things that he's saying to me to his sister, she would be like so excited for you and like wanting to meet me and wanting to be part of this.
I can't force people to do things they don't want to do.
Now he says I can't force people to do things that they don't want to do, when he just said that they would meet her if he asked them. So, is he lying? Well, like I said, it's complex. And I'm going to explain more of the complexity, but let's go a little further. Here is a very important and telling insight that I said I would share with you. Do you remember Dave sharing this with Molly?
I've had a lot of girls I've gone on a few dates with, never really introduced them to my family.
Straight from his own mouth, he has never introduced anyone to his family. He claims it's because his family is protective. He says they'll do whatever he wants, and yet he also says he can't force them to do anything that they don't want to do. Those are mixed messages, and when someone gives contradictory explanations like he did, it's a sign that even they don't fully understand what's going on inside of themselves. This is where trauma may be playing a role. If Dave experienced emotional neglect or inconsistent connection growing up, his early environment may have taught him that closeness isn't safe, that people can't be trusted, or that he isn't enough as is. That kind of early relational trauma often leads to confusion about intimacy, sort of that push-pull dynamic where a person longs for connection but fears being open to it at the same time. Letting someone into your world, especially your family, can feel incredibly exposing. And if your family dynamics are complicated, it only adds to that fear. You worry your partner will see parts of your life you've worked hard to avoid, explain away, or even disconnect from. So instead of integrating Lauren into his life, the deeper truth may be that he isn't ready for that level of emotional exposure. And without realizing it, he keeps her at a distance in the only way he knows how, by not letting her get too close to the parts of himself he's still unsure about. And for Lauren, this creates an emotional mismatch. She's showing up fully, bringing him into her world and trying to build trust, but Dave isn't meeting her there. Not because he doesn't care, but because in many ways he hasn't yet learned how to risk being fully known.
It's very hard for me to just walk away from it. But my heart thinks it's the right decision.
Yeah.
So Dave ends it, not surprisingly. But I want to show you a little bit more about when he talks with Molly for the first time. She gives insight into something about Dave.
My sister is just really important to me that she approves of what I do. She was not a fan of me doing this at all.
Dave says he needs his sister's approval, and that tells us something important. When someone places that much weight on a family member's opinion, especially in adult relationships, it can mean that their sense of self is still deeply tied to how they're seen by others, particularly those they grew up with. And in Dave's case, needing his sister's approval may be less about love or respect and more about fear. Fear of disconnection with her, fear of being wrong, or fear of stepping into his own choices without her validation. And when your identity is shaped around needing someone else's approval, it becomes nearly impossible to fully show up for a partner. So after talking with Molly, Dave seeks out Lauren.
One thing I'm really bad at is admitting that I'm wrong. It's not you. That's the thing about all this. It's not you. I'm so sick of having to try to defend you versus my friends versus my family.
Dave's statement about being tired of having to defend himself actually reveals a lot. He is not taking any responsibility for his role in the dynamic or anything that went on between him and Lauren. Instead, he is centering on his own discomfort. This is a sign that Dave has a lot of personal growth work to do. And if he chooses ever to do that work, it won't be easy, because real growth would require him to sit with discomfort, examine his patterns, examine his upbringing and his relationships with his family and friends, and take ownership instead of deflecting blame.
It was my fault. Like, it was my ego got in the way of like really seeing what we had. I guess what I'm saying is I'm really sorry.
In the clip I'm going to show you next, I'm going to explain why I don't feel that Dave is genuinely remorseful for how things played out. For one, it's clear he has been drinking, and alcohol tends to heighten whatever emotions that's already simmering underneath. I think what he is feeling right now is that he misses Lauren, but he really isn't acknowledging how any of his actions impacted Lauren. And then she pushes back a little bit, and this is what happens.
I care so much about you. And it felt so bad. I was just like, that's all I wanted.
Like, you didn't text me.
I know.
You didn't, like...
You didn't text me either.
And there it is, the bite back. You didn't text me either. So what's important to notice is that while he seems open at first, he is still controlling the narrative. But the moment that Lauren challenges that version of the events, he snaps back. That's not remorse. That's defensiveness. This is why I say that he's not truly remorseful for how Lauren was hurt in all of this. And just to be clear, I am not saying that Lauren doesn't have her own growth work to do. She absolutely does. But in this video, I'm just really focusing on what we're seeing play out with Dave. So for Dave, unless he's willing to acknowledge his part, the cycle will repeat with Lauren or with anyone else. Here's something worth understanding. Before we label someone as a liar or a manipulator, it's worth asking what's really driving their behavior. Sometimes the most confusing actions come from the deepest wounds. And while that does not excuse the harm or the hurt that they cause, understanding it helps us protect ourselves and respond with clarity and grow stronger within ourselves and perhaps our relationships. Well, so that is a wrap on episode 10. Make sure to come back for more Love is Blind. We are almost coming to an end, so stay tuned for more insights on the challenges of relationships. And if you found today's tips helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who might benefit. And don't forget to subscribe for more insights on love, relationships, and personal growth. See you next time.